Welcome, everybody, to the world's greatest podcast. My name is Craig Renti, the world's greatest podcast host. And today I have Matt. First of all, I was warned not to have you on the podcast.
By
Did
who
you know
this
that?
time?
I got a text message from someone the other day saying, do not have Matt on the podcast until he cuts his hair because he looks like a savage.
I told you, everyone has their price. Give me an offer. We can do it as an episode. I'll cut my hair on stream.
But I think you're like the Steve Martin of Saturday Night Live with this podcast. You are our most prolific podcast guest. Did you know that? You're like number one. You've been on the
That
show
I,
more than anybody.
is that good?
It's great. And I wore a hat. I have a hat here I'm going to put on just for you
Oh no.
because
This could go so many ways.
this is something besides me. I feel like this is something I hear you say all the time when you're talking to other people and you say, I've been saying the same thing and I'm always right and they just don't listen to me and if they just listen to me, so I'm going to put on my hat now for you. Palisade
I
was right
work
about
very
me.
hard to keep "I told you so" out of my vocabulary. I have a thesaurus just for that. My siblings will account for it. I think you just almost quoted my brother's best man speech at my wedding.
We've worked together a long time, so I sort of know. I've pulled you back from that conversation a few times, Matt. You can't say that. That's your inside voice, Matt. But today there is no inside voice. It's all an outside voice.
Oh no.
Yes, it's all an outside voice. So, Matt, one of the things that you have been working on is things that don't involve Oracle. You've been working, helping some of our clients deal with other vendors and sort of how they're auditing their customers. In addition to that, in previous lives, you have actually helped develop audit practices, particularly for Oracle. So I think you've got a great view of the market, what's happening today over the years. You've been on both sides of the fence, of the table. So that's what I wanted to talk about, a little bit about, you know, one side versus the other side. So first question for you is, which is more fun, auditing customers or defending customers from audits?
Oh, that really depends on what mood you catch me in. I would say, first of all, my measure of fun should not be anyone's metric for anything. There is something severely wrong with me. I would
It's
say
not how much pain you cause someone. Like that is not the measure of fun here.
I enjoy building new audit programs and I enjoy defending developed ones. Because that's one of those things that always comes up is maintaining something that's working is dull. It's if you're doing the same thing every single time, my eyes start to glaze over. But, developing a new program from scratch where you might have a 5-year time horizon to actually see any of these things get developed, because you might need to change your contracts in order to influence what you're going to be auditing 2, 3 years down the line. I really enjoy building new programs and new processes from scratch. And then at the same time, once they're in the status quo of, all right, everything's working, everything's pretty well ironed out, you just kind of need to operate it at load for a while to see what works and doesn't at scale. That's when I like switching sides and breaking it again. But that's the tinkerer in me of, I just want to work on stuff that doesn't work or find ways to break things that do.
So one of and I didn't want to focus on Oracle, but I'll lead with an Oracle question. What's broken about Oracle's audit process now? About how Oracle's auditing their customers? What's broken?
So, I mean, the expertise just isn't there anymore. Um, Back 10, 15 years ago and beyond, the people who initiated the audit were doing the analysis, collecting the data, putting together the analysis reports, and actually kind of knew how to answer to a pretty good level of detail a lot of the questions that might come up when presenting reports to customers. But nowadays, it's just assembly line model. You have project managers, you have back-end analysts who might not ever really talk to customers. And ultimately, everything is so compartmentalized that if you're asking questions to the person that you're talking to, you end up very quickly in a position where they can only answer surface deep questions and immediately need to go run for help if you make them start thinking about the exceptions or the whys behind some of the stuff that they just have as facts in front of them.
It sort of brings to mind, there's that saying, like, if you're running away, if you're, in the forest, you don't need to be the fastest person getting away from the bear. You just need to be faster than one other person. And it's sort of like these auditors we see, they don't need to be the experts. They don't need to be the most expert in that particular product. They just need to be a little bit more knowledgeable than the client, right? As long as they get the customer worried, they throw out some big words and terms and sort of, oh, our policy is ABC. The customer gets really worried and just writes the check. It's like they're trying to get to the least, I don't want to say valuable. It's just the least amount of expertise and still get the money from the client. That's just what I've seen.
Yeah, and the thing that is now even more so on the Java sales side with these non-audits is they don't even need to be right. They just need to kind of get it to the point
Oh
of
God, that's so true. You don't even need to be right. Yes.
they just need to get some degree of doubt so that they can say, all right, well, we believe you may be out of compliance, and if you can't prove you're not, you're going to be kind of out of luck.
Guilty
One thing
till
I've been
proven innocent. And now prove your innocence.
One of the things that I've been quoting a lot lately, because I mean, these days you're mostly dealing with sales. You're not dealing with LMS a lot of the times anymore. Is it's still on Oracle's website today on the license management page? Only LMS consultants can give you a compliance position. People from sales are not allowed to tell you you are or aren't in compliance. But when it comes to these Java engagements, it's all sales driven. It's very hard to get someone from LMS on the phone. And if you do, they're mostly just puppeting back what sales has already told you.
Yeah, we had, many years ago, our company was named Palisade Consulting. And I was on the phone with LMS, one of our very first clients, and they were going through, we were going through. I'm like, well, no, this is makes them in compliance or out of compliance, and they're correct. You can never talk to a customer about compliance. I'm like, I don't work for you. Like, no, LMS is the only one that could talk about compliance. So it was literally the next day I changed the name of the company to Palisade Compliance. I was like, that is so not true. When you say things like that, that is so not true. And I'm just as much able to talk about compliance as you are. And that, I think, was shocking. And now that we're in the non-Oracle space, it's shocking to some vendors. Like, this is our stuff. We're the only ones who could talk about compliance. And you're like, nah, it's just a contract issue, and overlaid with some technical, and you're going to have your opinion and I'm going to have my opinion, and mine's going to be better than yours. But,
Yeah.
so who else is out there actively auditing these days? What have you seen?
I mean, you've kind of got the big ones always going on. And one of the things we're always talking about is what is an audit versus what is a true up versus what is, the sales, soft audit. You've always got your VMware, your Broadcom, your Microsoft. They are always coming around, collecting every year like clockwork. It's really a matter of who's still in the process rather of moving to the cloud. Because once you're in those, hosted environments, you don't get an audit, you just get a bill. They already have all the data, they're hosting everything for you. There's not really anything to talk about. You negotiate a good cloud deal up front or you don't. And, at the end of the day, they don't need to audit you. They just send you a bill. So it's a lot of these on-prem licenses that are still out there getting caught up in the audit scope.
Yeah, even in the SaaS worlds, whether it's Fusion Cloud, we've had a few clients who have implemented Fusion Cloud, and then they were expecting to spend, make $100,000 a month, And then within a few months, they're spending $200,000 a month, and they literally can't figure out from, you know, how did Oracle come up with this bill, right? So we're in there sort of mapping, just like it's sort of like the on-prem world, but it's, we use different words or terminology, but what responsibilities and access rights to what in the on-prem world is what's responsibilities equal what product. Now it's what access rights equal sort of what would billing mechanism. We've seen that with ServiceNow as well, where customers go in and they literally can't figure out the usage. And you would think, like when we use some of the tools that we use, um, we have 20 seats for a product and you can't go to 21. You think, well, there's no way you can go out of compliance with that. But when it's consumption based, all right, it's maybe not a compliance issue, but it's a billing issue. At the end of the day, it's the same for the vendor. Like they want to allow you full access to this stuff, and then you just over deploy and over consume, and they make it very easy. So some vendors don't. Some vendors say, well, you only have 20. If you want 21, you got to call
Calls.
me.
Yeah.
And other vendors just, and I think Oracle's in that space still where they're, taking elements of the on-prem. We're going to trap our clients and do the same thing. It's not just Oracle, but I've seen other SaaS vendors do the same thing.
Yeah, and once you're in that ecosystem, the vendor lock-in is very real. And getting yourself back out of any of these cloud environments without running the bill up even more is going to be just as hard, especially if you decommission stuff on-prem and part of process getting out there in the first place. So that's just one of those things that not necessarily an audit, but you just get the bill in the mail.
You shared with me something the other day, and just because we've never used this word in an audit, and it wasn't around dollars, but you said this one vendor told our client they were using a trillion whatevers. I was like, a trillion? That's going to be expensive. So I think in our further conversation, you quickly educated them that the client wasn't using a trillion whatever. So tell us a little bit about because I think that's the shock and awe you were talking about. You just throw out it's a trillion, and customers go, "Oh crap! There's no way it's zero. I must owe this vendor something." So what happened?
So in that case, this goes back to what you were saying before about, what's in the contract versus what's not. The vendor got the client on the phone and started asking questions about usage and reporting and, how frequently we're performing certain actions. We're going to talk around the vendor as best we can here. But basically, at the end of the day, they weren't getting anywhere. So they took a number that didn't reflect the contracted term, but it was a big splashy number, and it was able to get enough attention when they threw it around that we got involved, other people at the client got involved, and it got enough attention that people started to actually address the vendor and their questions and start to figure out, all right, well, we know that number is wrong, but we don't necessarily know what number is right. So let's go back and read the contract and figure out, okay, what can we actually tell this vendor that we can in good faith stand behind and say, all right, we've read the agreement, we've read what we signed up to, we've reviewed our utilization, and this is what we believe the real number should be. Um, it's clear that the vendor didn't really read the agreement. It's amazing how often auditors don't actually read the agreements for the vendors or for the customers that they are auditing, as opposed to just going off of the boilerplate language that they're trained on, and figuring out, how do we stop digging and head towards getting the vendor to accept, a technical truth that's based on the agreement.
I mean, that whole idea of reading the contracts, you're right. It's so many vendors. I think you said this to me a few weeks ago. These auditors are auditing to their standard templates and not auditing to what the customer actually signed up for. And if you're, working for an organization that is being audited or could be audited, I think that's really good advice is to make sure that the auditors understand what you have in place with that company, not what their standard policy could be or their standard documents. Because it's expensive to hire auditors who can read contracts, and it takes time to do that versus just, uh, they have this thing over here and they have that thing and we ran a report, so they're more likely to be audited and or out of compliance. So we'll just send them a letter, and then because they're putting that. What I've seen is technology vendors put the cost of an audit on their customers. The time is on the customer side to gather data, to process data, to read contracts, to come up with rationales of defense. And auditors just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. They make it very easy for
I mean,
themselves to audit.
when I was developing the old WebLogic audit program, it was right after WebLogic had gone from BEA to Oracle, and there were still a lot of legacy licenses out there that used BEA paper with BEA metrics, with BEA policies. And what very often would happen in those early days of audits, we don't see it as much anymore simply because no one's on that paper anymore. But if we had an audit where we couldn't necessarily prove you needed more licenses and need to do a true up, if we could just convert people off of the legacy BEA licenses and get them on an equivalent, relatively close, relatively inexpensive migration to default Oracle processors of WebLogic Enterprise Edition or Suite, that audit was a success because what that did was then set us up for, all right, next time there is a problem, next time we can come in and do an audit. It might not be for 2 years, it might not be for 5, but it's going to go smoother next time because now there's no more custom language, there's no more legacy metrics and policies to keep track of. And when we come through, the process is going to be able to run smoothly and we'll see what we get on the next go around.
That's a great point, and it's something we see in the Broadcom space with VMware. Trying to move customers off of legacy paperwork onto whatever the new thing is, because the new thing is going to be more in line. Broadcom's new agreements are more in line with Broadcom's vision and where they want to bring customers than what customers had negotiated with VMware. So I think that tactic, again, you see it all the time. We've updated our terms and conditions, so just click I accept, and who reads those? But sort of this multi-step audit process. Okay, we're gonna reach out to them. First step is let's move them onto the new paper. Let's take away all their contractual protections. Then next year we'll get them. Next year, when this other thing happens, or the next time they need to buy some stuff, that old language or that old license is gone, and now we know how to do. Now we're auditing to our standard again, right? So bring them onto the standard so that we can use that as the benchmark or catapult to get them to give us more money. Ultimately, that's auditing. I know we say it's about protecting IP, but it is really about generating revenue. It's if audits resulted in companies obtaining less revenue, they would not audit you. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah,
What-
I mean, I remember again, early of my days at Oracle, LMS had crossed something like 1 billion in revenue for the year. And it was a whole presentation and party and, up and away from there. So I can only imagine what it peaked at in these last several years before, the cloud deals are obviously going to be recognized quite differently and, make that a
Right.
little murkier. But I'd be interested to see what it actually peaked at.
Hmm. Well, I do know there was a time on LinkedIn where the LMS might have still been over there, although I'm sure you didn't have this on your LinkedIn profile, um, where the analysts would put in their bio, "Hey, I helped close, $100 million this year. I was 20% over quota." I was like, they were literally proclaiming how they were, maybe not compensated directly on revenue, but how that was a KPI for them. Because if you're an auditor and you're looking for a job, you want your next employer to know, hey, I was supposed to bring in 20 and I brought in 30. You should hire me. And then we started, taking screen grabs and posting them on LinkedIn, took people's names out. And immediately, like everyone in LMS, like overnight changed their LinkedIn profiles and I know that wasn't an accident, right?
Yeah, it's hard when that's a kind of KPI because I mean, you don't necessarily control who you're going to be assigned to audit. It's on the auditor to find something.
Right.
We have so many cases where I mean, Oracle especially, but everybody, there are so many edge cases because a lot of these contracts and a lot of these, definitions were written before technology hit, the sophistication that it has today. So much of Oracle's VMware virtualization policy is just the result of the processor definition was written before virtualization was utilized the way it is
Mhm.
today. So all the time we have edge cases where, well, that's a restricted use license, or, oh, that might be included or embedded. But at the end of the day, we have seen cases where the same vendor looking at the same data, the same configurations, give completely different rulings on how it should be licensed based on what else was going on. If they have an easy win on something you can agree to elsewhere, you don't need to go after these other points of contention. But if you're an auditor and you're coming up with $0 in revenue to show for your time and your analysis team's time, you're going to start combing through and looking for those edge cases and those ambiguous cases, and you're going to try to get something to show that you at least, paid for the relevant team's time in getting there.
How long, I mean, you talked about, you know, things that are in contracts, the contracts are written before the new technology and the new shiny objects, and it's not so new anymore. It's been a couple of years is AI, ChatGPT, all that fun stuff. How long before technology vendors start auditing their clients saying, hey, you have 100 users, but you've got all these chatbots and AI agents doing all this stuff with our software, and they need to be counted as users, and you need to give us more money for that. I mean, is that coming?
I think they'll count them as not, non-human operated devices. My call shot for Oracle and AI is they're going to start doing nonsense like the users who generate the prompts are users as opposed to the clients themselves. They'll find some way to get a cut out of any of that proliferation.
Measure at the front end. You have to measure at the front end. So Matt,
Prompt engineers are a multiplexer.
what would you do if you were designing an audit practice for a software company today? How do you trap your customers? Like, what do you need to do? What are
Well, I
some of
mean,
this?
the first question, even before that, is do you want to trap them? Um, obviously, you're gonna get something out of
We're putting our black hats on today. We're being evil auditors here. We're not. You got to stop being nice. Like you get hired by an oligarch to create this tool to audit customers and generate billions of dollars. What are some tips you have for those big companies looking to do that?
I mean, if you really want to try to find ways to extract revenue from your auditing team for the shiny new software company you just acquired, um, time horizon is important. As I was saying before with the contracts, you know, you might have highly customized contracts that are going to be really time consuming to audit. You know, getting a more standardized approach to having consistent terms and conditions, you might have to plan 2 or 3 years out so that you can get people on current agreements that were highly customized into a simpler, more standardized format so that you can develop a program to work towards auditing. Because ultimately, when you're auditing, you need to keep your costs down on the audit side. It doesn't make sense to hire highly skilled, highly technical people for large sums of money that take years to train up. My joke always when developing the um, the audit programs in any number of cases, or even some of our own training, uh, I should be able to take my dumbest brother and sit him in training, and by the time he finishes it, he should be able to at least do a basic level of going through the motions, and then you build and develop from there. So, in order to make an audit program that's going to be successful, whether you're trapping people or not, you need to make sure that you actually have a process that can be trained and followed with escalation points, with deviations for where it goes off the rails. Because otherwise, you're going to spend so much money running your audits that when you miss and you have those audits where you can't find stuff, because you can't force people to be out of compliance, more or less. But you need to make sure you keep your costs down and keep that process going so you can have it run smoothly.
So having three brothers, when you say your dumbest brother, there's one comes to mind. I'm not going to mention who that is, but
I was going to
we
say
have
it's debatable which one you might think.
we have to find a better way to say that. The least smart. I don't know. The,
I feel like each of them have their claim, and each of them might think I'm talking about them, but that's neither here nor there.
um, you just said, and I'm going to disagree a little bit that companies can't force you to go out of compliance, and that I say is true, but what they can do is force you to explain yourself and force you. And I'll, the one example I give, and Broadcom's a great example because it's more recent, but in our legacy Oracle world, it was 2017 when Oracle changed a website and said, oh, by the way, you need twice as many licenses when you run on AWS. So
You can set people up for failure.
right, so the day before I wasn't getting calls from our clients who used AWS because we were giving them advice and guidance. As you know, we always look at the contract and not some stupid policy document. But there are people who still read those policy documents, and sometimes they're helpful and sometimes they're not. But then I was getting calls after that saying, oh, I'm out of compliance. Well, why? Well, Oracle's new policy. I'm like, well, you were in compliance yesterday. You didn't change anything. Your contract is the same. And now Oracle's saying you're out of compliance. You need more licenses. Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't literally the next day, but it was very, that I think that was in January. So by February, their third quarter close, and definitely by May, it was hot and heavy in terms of those conversations with Oracle. But I think there are vendors out there who do want to snag their clients and force them out of compliance and force them, whether it's to give up your old contracts or buy more licenses and just, insert their will on top of the client. Say, you will do this because I say so. It still happens. And it's not just Oracle that does it. I think Oracle's really successful at it. And other companies maybe have taken a page out of Oracle's playbook.
I mean, it's one of those things where every once in a while we'll be on our team meetings and it'll be kind of a discussion of what familiar names are we seeing on some of these other audits simply because a lot of auditing teams are made up of or run by ex Oracle because if you came up through LMS at Oracle 10-15 years ago, there are a lot of useful skills that came with the territory there.
See that all the time. And on the executive level, you see so many former Oracle executives who are CEOs at other companies. On the LMS audit level, Oracle auditors are everywhere. Just they've taken off their Oracle hat and they put it on a new name. Um, when is Oracle going to do? I think I'm waiting for this. So write this down. You ready? Because this is big. Broadcom makes a change to VMware, say, hey, you got to buy subscription. Can't buy these perpetual license anymore. When's Oracle doing that for database?
So I think there is, well, that's not where I thought you were going with it. I think we're going to start seeing Oracle drawing harsher lines around VMware and virtualization usage on ULAs and other ways of using database. The same way that we used to and still sometimes see them say, you're not allowed to certify any public cloud providers as part of your ULA.
Right.
As Broadcom continues to make their push on modernizing VMware and monetizing it into the subscriptions in a different way, that we're going to see Oracle try to draw some lines around what value you can get out of VMware on those
You think they're
ULAs.
going to get tougher? Like they weren't crazy enough. You think they're going to go a next level on virtualization?
I think they're sick of arguing about how to count VMware, and they're just going to say you can't. Something that we saw just happen with Java over the last few years. They tried doing name user plus and processors for the Java subscription, and all these renewals, all these things we had where people who weren't used to dealing with Oracle on other products would get questions about, all right, you want to renew 20 processors. please, give us your social security number, your firstborn's name, and, every single core in VMware in your environment. And people just kind of balked at that and said, what are you talking about? We can't even disclose that to you if we wanted to. Why do you need that? So a lot of those renewals got hung up very quickly at how do you count VMware? Something that if you go on Oracle's website even today, it says VMware is soft partitioning. It says you can't use it as a way to limit the number of cores, but nowhere on their site does it actually tell you how to count it. It's all, telling you what you can't do. There's nothing prescriptive on the website that says for this configuration, you need this many licenses.
Right,
Um,
right.
it would make everyone's life much easier, but it's not there. But ultimately, they moved over to the employee metric because they were on that case with Java where you could very easily get people to the yes, we need it, but then they would lose people for months on the how much do you need. So I think they're just sick of arguing about it, and very soon we'll just be seeing them trying to discard. I'm interested to see this year's batch of ULA renewals in a couple of months and see what they try to slip in there.
Well, it's also, I think their business is changing. We just had, or they just had Oracle Open World, Cloud World, AI World. It's the new name of it. It'll be something different next year. Um, and, they announced a few very large, 9, 10 figure deals, 11 figure deals with, these other mega vendors. And I was had lunch with one of the analysts who covers Oracle. And he said to me, if what Oracle says is correct, the the Oracle we know in terms of licensing software, that's 25% of Oracle in 2030. It's data centers and AI and chips and just, being a cloud infrastructure provider and sort of AI agent is the business. So what you do will still be huge and very important to Oracle, but a database license is becoming less important to Oracle. And I don't know if I agree with that, because I think if Oracle didn't have their database, everything else unravels, right? Everyone says, well, I don't need to use your database. Screw you then. I'm going to use something else. And now I don't need, you bought all those application companies. I can run it on something else. Like that was for me brilliant by Oracle years ago, is buying all those other companies. But they said the Oracle is if Larry's correct, the Oracle is dead. Like they're just going to do things so differently. And I've seen some different behavior, both good and bad, from Oracle reps in terms of how it impacts their clients. So definitely they are changing one way or another. Although I don't know if they'll ever be nice and warm and fuzzy to their customers, because it is still about margins and revenue and
We've
lock-in.
got a couple where I'm kind of setting the expectation that, if I'm Oracle and I have customers who are ex-ULA consumers who are never going to buy another on-prem premise license again because they're shrinking their Oracle dependency, they're shrinking their footprint, they're doing a little bit more SaaS solution in the cloud for anything that doesn't need an Oracle database on-prem. Um, the amount of money they make on the support, the margin on the support, and the rate at which they can just keep increasing it with their, completely arbitrary inflationary adjustment rate, which has that number ever actually matched inflation by any scale?
When I started, when I was a young man and I started at Oracle, their price list literally said that the CPI indexed as published in the New York Times on a certain date. So it was literally, you could go right to it. And then we decided, well, we don't want to be locked into that. Sometimes we're going to give customers less than what the New York Times says. That's not
I
true,
mean,
but
I hear we have no inflation right now, that it's completely gone, it's done, but somehow Oracle is still asking 8%.
that's a
So
different podcast discussion, Matt.
so Oracle can just take that revenue off of their support stream on these XULA customers. They don't need to do anything. that is free money coming in the door that's contractually locked in that they can just keep pressing their thumb on the scale and increasing the size. And the amount of effort it takes any of our clients, we do a lot of work to get people out of ULA support streams. And typically it takes multiple years of sustained effort to make a dent in getting those things down.
Right.
It's possible, but it's one of the most difficult things we do is managing post ULA support reductions. And Oracle knows it. So, all this other cloud data center, AI, subscription revenue that they might be moving towards, when it comes to on-prem, their licenses are always going to be part of the ecosystem. People are always going to have stuff they can't release into the public or even a private cloud. It's going to have to stay on-prem. Many times legally it has to stay on-prem. So those on-prem licenses are always going to exist, and the cost benefit of owning them is just going to get worse and worse over time as the support costs continue to mount.
And that's, obviously there are companies out there that will help you. They'll provide what we call independent support. So not Oracle support, Spinnaker, Rimini, IBM TLS, Support Revolution. And unfortunately, they've all gotten in the business of providing some advice and guidance to customers. And I've definitely seen degrading in the quality of that advice when you're going, and it's not just those companies, but Azul or whoever's competing with Oracle in a technical space. When they start giving you licensing advice, and it's not just Oracle, right? If you're thinking about moving away from Microsoft and you go to a Microsoft competitor and say, "Hey, can I do this with my license?" It's just fraught for mistakes or just sloppy work or just giving them the answer they want that you want them to hear because there's a not so hidden agenda of um, wanting to buy
every
this other
every
product.
couple of weeks I'll get one of those where I get asked a question and I can look through the email thread and be like, all right, I'm not the first person you asked this question, and something about the answer you got made you think to call me or
Right.
reach out to me and get a follow-up. So yeah, that definitely has been happening a lot more in the last year or two. But it is something that we do regularly deal with. And I mean, you and I talk about this all the time. We don't sell anything else. So, it's easy for us to give answers that people don't want to hear. I very often, well, I very rarely get to make people's day. I'm always giving people bad news. I'm always telling people stuff they don't want to hear, yourself included sometimes. And just, yeah, there's something freeing about being able to just tell people what they need to hear instead of what they want to hear.
Right. So we've been on for almost an hour. One final question before we wrap up. Um, most companies, medium, large companies, they're managing over 100 different software vendors and SaaS providers. My my thinking is you cannot, it's impossible to be in compliance with all of them at every given moment. I just think there's going to, your business is changing, their policies are changing, your usage is changing, they update a website, something happens that is going to put you at risk at some point for going out of compliance. And you might get away with it. You might be out of compliance for a while and then vendor never knocks on your door. You might never even know you're out of compliance. But what can people do if their job is, hey, I'm the guy or lady who's got to make sure my company's in compliance with all of our IT assets? What are some recommendations you have for that person who's managing 100 different vendors plus?
I mean, first of all, good luck. I mean, secondly, preventative care is going to get you way further than dealing with problems as they arise. If you are in a position where you are being reactive and waiting for problems to appear in front of you before you do anything with them, you're going to be playing whack-a-mole for the rest of your life. You are always going to have a problem. You are always going to be in a dispute, and you're going to be writing checks. Um, Obviously, if you are just starting on getting a handle on, your broader IT asset management from a compliance position and a licensing position, you've got to do that first. You have to kind of get ahead of whack-a-mole so that you can start putting time into the preventative care. Something that we do a lot of now is start educating people in legal and procurement so that when they see those notices, when they see those requests for, hey, we notice you haven't been filling out these license verification forms that you agreed to provide us, that sets off red flags before you get to the point where the vendor is telling you, you're in breach, you haven't filled one of these out in 5 years. So preventative care is going to be much better for everyone in the long term. It sometimes is going to be a little harder to demonstrate the value of that. One of the things, and I think we stopped doing it 8 years ago, is, how much money did we save you? Cost avoidance is weird. It's easy to make a hypothetical. We avoided $1.2 billion in Oracle license fees because of one relatively minor VM issue in a large data center. It's not real money. And when you're doing preventative care for any vendor, it's hard to spin out the value of, people above you in management are going to be telling you, all right, what are we getting for the money we're spending on these people and these consultants and these hours? And it's sometimes hard to demonstrate the value of, we're not really making any money or saving any concrete dollars, but we are preventing these costs from overrunning elsewhere.
Uh,
So that's a weird success state, is being in that position, but it takes quite a lot of time before you can get to that, of putting out all the fires, starting to set up those early detection systems for problems, and then you can actually start being proactive once you get there, of going through your contracts and actually reading, do we have reporting requirements we're not fulfilling? Do we have technologies that we just don't match our use case? It's interesting to see quite how many problems you can find when you actually start looking.
Well, and I think that we're typically brought in, whether it's an Oracle problem or a Broadcom problem or a whatever problem, we're brought in to fix a problem at first. And then, we land on that problem, we fix the problem, and that's when we start seeing these other things. So have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And have you thought about this? Unfortunately, I think people, and I did it when I worked for a big company, they're not spending money until there's a problem. So the problem avoidance, that you're going to pay the fire marshal, or, to come in and make sure your fire escape works and your sprinklers work. Um, maybe if your house is on fire, the firefighters are there, you're going to pay them. Absolutely. So we definitely see a lot more energy in when there's a fire, and putting that out. But this was a great conversation. I know we were just sort of touching base on the industry, or the environment that we live in terms of audits and compliance. Now that we're doing more than just Oracle and helping with these other vendors, it's interesting to see the patterns of behavior that are the same. And we sort of we're under the covers doing this for some clients for a little more than a year now. Now that we have rolled these services out broader, it's really interesting to, like you said, see the faces of people who are now at other companies that we knew at Oracle. And sort of see some of the same tactics. So I don't see audits going away, even as people move to the cloud. I just think maybe it's changing shape. It's hitting more the usage tracking and measuring, and maybe there you could actually avoid some costs, and you put some numbers on. We're spending 300,000 a month, and now you did our license optimization. Now it's $200,000 a month. But you're not getting, once you write that check to the vendor, they're not returning it. I don't think I've ever seen a vendor send money back to a customer and say, you know what, I audited you too hard. Here's some money back. Like, that just doesn't happen,
I mean, sign us up for that one.
right? We're gonna do that. We're gonna make Oracle start giving money back when we get involved. How's that? That's the new challenge for 26.
I accept a lot of very stupid challenges. I don't believe that's going to be one I entertain.
I remember Safra, she wasn't CEO at the time, but she said to me, Craig, this is Oracle. We don't like to write big checks. We like to cash big checks. I was like, okay, let's set the stage for a lot of work that I did over there. Anyway, Matt, thank you very much for being the most prolific world's greatest podcast guest.
I may get a plaque for my office that just says I don't go anywhere or do anything, so that I can point to it, because it seems to be the most common phrase I say these days.
That's
So
funny.
you know where to find me if you need another guest.
All right. And listen, everyone, thank you for joining. If you need help with an audit, give us a call. If you like this podcast, like or subscribe. And thanks, everyone. And we will see you next time on the world's greatest podcast.